questions in our journals too that you guys have generated from previous guests that you might look to and then before we shoot. So
Yeah.
What's your favorite subject to read about?
My favorite subject to read about? That's so hard.
Or or like, what's your current favorite book if you have one?
So, this is good. This is a good question. Because, like, my job sort of it takes over my life, right? Because anytime I'm reading a book, you could argue that I'm like doing my job, right? So a lot of time, I read a lot of YA, young adult literature, that I probably wouldn't read if I didn't have this job. But I really enjoy it. So, I don't know. I don't know if I would have ever started reading YA literature if I didn't have this job. But now, whenever I read a YA book, I have another book that I can recommend to students. So I'm like, what kind of books do you like? And then if they tell me they want a tearjerker, I can be like, oh, I've read these 3 tearjerkers last summer. Or whatever, you know. And a lot of times I'm reading like the books that are relevant to what's happening in the Madison Library, right? So when we found out that Arun Gandhi was coming, I read his book. And when we found out that Jill Lepore was coming, I started reading her work, but she's super prolific, so there's no way I could read everything. Yeah. But I've read a few of her books. And so right now I'm reading Tom Hanks's book. Tom Hanks, the actor, wrote a book of short stories. And the reason I'm reading it,
He's coming?
He's coming to Portland. So the reason I'm reading his book is because he is going to be at the Portland Book Festival, which used to be called Wordstock. So if you guys were familiar with Wordstock, they changed the name and now it's called the Portland Book Festival, although on the website it's called PDX Book Fest. I'm not really sure. I think they're still trying to figure out what it's called. I wish that they had just called it Wordstock, the Portland Book Festival, because Wordstock was like such a cool, easy way to refer to it. Question?
Okay, I kind of like lost myself something.
Oh, sorry, okay. Yeah.
Has there been any struggles with your job?
Struggles with my job? Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked me that, because I should put this in the presentation.
you sound so excited about your story.
I'm so glad you asked me. I really, really need to put this in my presentation. Because when I told you guys about doing my student teaching at that school, where I was doing student teaching in the library and in an elementary school, in an English classroom, that school was Riverdale. And Riverdale is in the wealthiest zip code in the state.
Oh.
And so I learned how to be a school librarian in like this very ideal circumstance. And so that librarian at that time, which was like 20 years ago, had a $40,000 a year budget. So she could do everything. She could buy any books for kids. She could take them to have any authors come. She could like take them on field trips.
How much is
$40,000.
this
Did she get paid
I
by
don't think that $40,000.
I'm getting to that.
Oh, okay.
So the library budget for the Madison High School Library is this much, $0. Zero.
They get 40,000. That's
So
hey,
what I do
rob the library.
is I write a lot of grants, and I have built, since I've been here for so long, I've built a lot of relationships with community organizations and things like that, and we scrape and fundraise and sell t-shirts and buttons and do all that stuff because Madison students should have the best library program in the world. You should have anything that Riverdale students have. That's what I believe.
Yes.
And so I work really hard to make that happen for you guys. Yes.
Is there a reason you came to Madison specifically?
Well, I have another story about that.
I'm so guilty.
I actually, so I told you how I got interested in teaching as I wanted to be with little kids. And so my endorsement actually is pre-K through 12. So I wanted to be an elementary school librarian. So I started as an I started as a middle school librarian at Tubman. And then I worked at the elementary level for a couple years, but those positions were cut. And the Madison position was open because the librarian had retired. And the district placed me in this position, and I was like, no, I don't want to work at a high school. And they were like, well, don't worry, it's just a placeholder kind of thing. You're not going to end up there. But The principal at the time would not release me from the job,
Wow.
and I was so mad at her
It's a bummer.
because I wanted to work with little kids. I was so mad at her that I took a year leave because I had had a baby and taken a year off. But I was like, well, I'm going to spend another year with my baby then because I don't want to work at Madison. I don't want to work at a high school.
Oh, wow.
And so she was able to force me to stay for 30 days while they were finding my replacement, even though they knew who my replacement was going to be. And during that 30 days, I fell in love with Madison.
Really?
So I took the year off, and then when I had the 9 months off, I was like, it'll be okay. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else. I love it here so much.
If you had the chance, well, if there was like an opportunity, like at elementary school as a librarian, would you take it?
That's a really good question. So there have been lots of opportunities because I've been working here for 17 years. So, and I'm the senior librarian in the district, and I have been for a while. I'm not the oldest one, but I've been doing this job longer than any other librarians in the district. So anytime, like when the Lincoln librarian retired or the Wilson librarian retired, everyone's like, don't you want to go to Lincoln or Wilson, whatever? And I'm like, no. I love Madison. I can't even imagine like going back and working with all those rich people with all their like fancy problems. I mean, we have problems. There are different problems, and I don't know. Just Madison is a much better match with my background, with my growing up. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, actually. So 90% of the students that I went to school with were Hispanic, and I just feel more comfortable around a diverse group of people. I love Madison for that. I love the diversity here. It makes it a really rich, interesting place to work. Yeah. I mean, good on those people who work with those rich kids. Whatever, it's okay. Yeah.
When you were little, did you read a lot when you were little, or did you enjoy reading books?
You guys have such good questions. I know. It's not like I get interviewed every day, so I'm not usually talking about these things. So I grew up super poor, and I was raised by my dad,
Yeah.
and he never understood that reading was important. And so we didn't have any books in my house growing up. And so reading was like kind of this magical thing to me, but it wasn't encouraged like at home. But I do remember like going into the school library when I was little, and just being like, wow, look at all those books. There's so much to learn in all those books. Because, you know, it looks like so many when you're little. It's probably like a tiny little library, but I always kind of thought that books were magical.
Yeah.
And I would read whatever I could get my hands on, but I wasn't really encouraged to.
So like in the beginning, you listed all these like degrees and stuff you had, but like were any of them specifically for the job you did before when you were in HR? Because none of them seem like you
I
degrees you have for
know.
HR. So like.
I also bartended.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yes, I like those.
So, yeah, I don't usually talk to high school students
It's a
about
good
it, but-
question though, because we heard that from our other people we've interviewed, right? Like they studied things that didn't necessarily relate to teaching.
Yeah, so I had a BA in philosophy, and I was really interested in traveling. I studied abroad when I was in college, getting my undergraduate degree. Took a year off, so it was like kind of a spotty situation. It wasn't like I started and I went for 4 years and then I ended. I started at the school in my hometown, so I went to UTEP for a year. Then I transferred to the University of Texas at Arlington. Then I found out about the study abroad program. Then I took a year off, and then I ended up back finishing at the University of Texas at Arlington for my bachelor's. But at that time, I was just really interested in traveling. So I got a job on a cruise ship, and I was in charge of the bar and the gift shop, and I did that, traveled, and worked at resorts. Then eventually, there used to be, and actually I think they're going to start up again here, there was a company that ran river cruises out to Astoria and down to Hood River. And so I ended up working for that company, and then I moved into their office. And then I was doing office manager and HR, and then I got a job with a fancier company doing HR.
So you have a lot of stuff in education. If you were switched to a teaching job, firstly, would you take it? But secondly, what would you teach?
classroom teaching position.
Yeah,
Sounds
Let me tell you about the difference. So this is what's so different about, say, Ms. Onus's job compared to my job, right? So she sees you guys like on a regular, she knows she's gonna see you all every other day for 90 minutes, basically. Like, she gets to have this really deep relationship with you over the course of the school year. But I get to see you go from your freshman year all the way through your senior year. So it's a different sort of relationship that I have with kids. I never get to have that like intense, I see you every day. Well, I mean, some people are in the library every day. But for the most part, you know, for the student body, it's like, but I really like the way I get to see people change and grow over the course of their 4 years at Madison. It's really cool. So would I take a classroom teaching job? I guess, if I had to. I really love my job.
What would you teach?
So I am qualified to teach in, well, I have a license. I guess I'm not really qualified because I have no experience. But I could teach in a self-contained classroom, pre-K through 8, or I could teach like a humanities at the middle school level. So I would have to pass a test to be able to teach like this class, because I don't have a master's in English. I don't have a degree in English. So to take this job, I'd have to take more classes.
This isn't like super important, I was just curious. Was that lady who was gonna replace you mad at you that you didn't like leave? When you were like, you
the
didn't
sub.
wanna leave.
No. So he knew, it was a he actually, and he knew that he was just subbing for the year that I was on leave.
Oh.
Yes, he would have loved to have stayed at Madison. Didn't work out for him.
And, you know, Ms. Sullivan brings something up that's really interesting. That's a really common practice. Like, when I was hired at Madison, my old school district could have made that same decision to hold me for that first whole month of September.
Yeah, you have no control over your life, really.
To breaking a contract.
The district control. Yes.
How have you seen the Madison Library grow since you started here?
Oh my gosh, you guys would not even recognize the Madison High School Library. One of the problems when I first came here, when they told me I was going to be stuck here, the first time I walked into the Madison High School Library, it was the most depressing thing I had ever seen in my life. There had been a flood that summer, so someone had left a hose running on the roof. And so you can actually still kind of see it if you look up high in the library. There are places where you can see water had come down. So when I walked in, well, for one thing, there was no color because the carpet and the paint and all that stuff happened after I got here. So everything was that color, which is called mushroom. Everything.
Mushroom.
The floor, everything was just this one color. And, you know, the lights were off when I came in. And because of the flood, all the furniture was like piled on top of each other. And the librarian who was retiring got rid of a ton of books so the shelves were really empty. There were 0 computers. Like, it was so depressing. That was like part of it. I was like, this is awful. No, don't make me. I do, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so then like bit by bit, if it's a student project, it doesn't like have to be approved by the district. So the carpet installation was a donation from across the street to that carpet place. And it was a student project, so students installed the carpet. And then also we painted, you know how the ceiling's that blue color? Because the fish used to hang up in the ceiling, and I always used to say, because that was the only thing that was cool about the whole space, was the fish that were hanging in the ceiling. And I always used to say, oh, we should paint the ceiling to go with the fish so it looks like they're swimming around in tropical water, you know. And so then eventually a student project happened, and it was a leadership class at that time actually. We came and painted, and we added color to like the ends of the bookshelves in the nonfiction section, and I bought those IKEA sofas, and just tried to make it more like welcoming, comfortable. Plants really help.
How much money have you personally invested into the library?
I don't even know, but so I'm not a religious person, but are you guys familiar with the term tithing? So in some religions, you are expected to give a tenth of your earnings to the church.